The temporal doppelganger paradox, meeting yourself in time. We've considered changing the grand sweep of history, the subtle loops of information, the very fabric of causality, and the weight of foreknowledge. Now, let us turn inward to perhaps the most intimate and existentially unsettling encounter imaginable within the framework of time travel. The paradox of meeting yourself. Imagine the currents of time not just as pathways to other eras, but as mirrors reflecting different moments of your own existence. What happens when the reflection steps out of the glass? What occurs when your past, present, or future self materializes before you, a living, breathing doppelganger separated, or perhaps connected, by the very time you've traversed? This encounter, the meeting with your temporal twin, opens a unique and deeply personal Pandora's box of paradoxes. The scenario itself can unfold in countless ways, each carrying its own peculiar chill. Perhaps it's a fleeting glimpse across a crowded street in a past you're visiting. You see a face, shockingly familiar, younger, perhaps more innocent or naive, before they turn a corner and vanish. Or maybe exploring the future, you encounter an older version of yourself, etched with lines of experience you don't yet possess, carrying a weariness or perhaps a serenity that feels utterly alien, yet undeniably you. Maybe the encounter is accidental, bumping into your past self in a corridor of history, a clumsy moment freighted with impossible significance. Or perhaps it's deliberate, driven by loneliness, a desperate need for guidance, or a complex plan. You use your temporal device to arrange a meeting, stepping out to face yourself. The initial reaction in such a scenario is almost impossible to truly fathom. Beyond mere surprise, there lies the profound shock of the uncanny valley made manifest. To see your own eyes looking back at you with independent consciousness, to hear your own voice speaking words you haven't formed, to witness your familiar mannerisms embodied in a separate being, it's a violation of the fundamental assumption of singular identity. It could inspire terror, a primal rejection of something deeply unnatural, or perhaps an overwhelming curiosity, a magnetic pull towards this impossible reflection. Would you feel empathy, revulsion, a strange sense of camaraderie, or an immediate, inexplicable antagonism? The sheer ontological weirdness of sharing the same space, the same moment, with another iteration of your own being is enough to destabilize one's grasp on reality. But beyond the immediate psychological jolt, the physical and causal implications ripple outwards. What are the rules governing such an encounter? Physics, as we understand it, values conservation laws. What happens if these two versions of the same entity, presumably composed of the same fundamental matter blueprint, were to touch? Science fiction often invokes dramatic tropes, catastrophic annihilation, perhaps like matter meeting antimatter, though the analogy is flawed as both selves are ordinary matter, or perhaps a forced merging, a bizarre fusion of consciousness or form. Or maybe nothing. Perhaps you are simply two distinct physical objects in the same space-time, capable of shaking hands, embracing, or indeed coming to blows with no more inherent physical drama than any two separate individuals interacting. Yet, the intuitive sense that occupying the same coordinate in space-time by different temporal versions of the same entity should be problematic, or at least significant, lingers. Does the universe even permit such proximity, or would subtle forces nudge temporal paths apart to prevent direct interaction? The causal paradoxes, however, are more concrete and immediately recognizable, echoing themes from our previous explorations, but with a deeply personal twist. If your future self appears before you and offers advice, perhaps a warning about a coming danger or guidance on a crucial decision, where does that information originate? If you follow the advice and succeed, you become the future self who possesses that knowledge because you received it from yourself. It's a bootstrap paradox of personal guidance, an information loop created within your own timeline, potentially guiding your life along a path determined by knowledge seemingly conjured from your own future. Does this lock you into that future, fulfilling a predestination loop where the advice guarantees the outcome? Conversely, what if you, as your future self, visit your past incarnation? Perhaps you try to correct a mistake you regret or offer encouragement during a difficult time. Does your appearance, your words, alter the trajectory of your past self? If your intervention significantly changes their experiences, their choices, their personality development, then you, the future self performing the intervention, might be altered or even cease to exist in your current form, echoing the grandfather paradox. How can you intervene to change the past that created you without erasing the you that performs the intervention? Or does the timeline split, as the many worlds interpretation might suggest, leaving your original self unchanged while creating a divergent history for the past self you interacted with? The consequences spiral outwards. Changing your own past could inadvertently change relationships, career paths, even the existence of loved ones tied to your original timeline. The transfer of knowledge in these encounters is particularly potent. Imagine meeting your future self and resisting the urge to ask about major world events or lottery numbers. What about asking deeply personal questions? Do I achieve my dreams? Do I find happiness? Do I recover from this illness? How do I die? The knowledge gained, whether reassuring or devastating, would inevitably reshape your present motivations, choices, and emotional state. Knowing a future failure might crush your ambition. Knowing of a future success might breed complacency. Knowing the time and nature of your demise could cast a pall over every remaining moment, or perhaps inspire you to live more fully. This foreknowledge, delivered by the most reliable source imaginable, yourself, acts as a powerful shaping force, potentially locking you onto the path that leads to that specific future, fulfilling the prophecy simply by knowing it. This leads us into the deepest waters of this paradox, the profound psychological and philosophical implications for personal identity. Who are you when confronted with another version of yourself? Philosophers have long debated what constitutes personal identity over time. Is it the continuity of the physical body, a problem raised by the ship of Theseus, given our cells constantly replace themselves? Is it the continuity of memory and consciousness? Time travel, especially meeting oneself, throws these questions into sharp relief. Seeing your past self, perhaps young and naive, might trigger complex emotions: tenderness, frustration, embarrassment, a longing for lost and innocence. You might want to protect them, guide them, warn them. But are they truly you? They haven't lived your experiences, don't possess your memories or your scars. Seeing your future self could be even more jarring. Are you destined to become this person? Do you admire their wisdom or pity their perceived decline? Do you feel alienated from this future possibility or inextricably bound to it? The encounter forces a confrontation with your own becoming, your own potential decay or growth, in a way that nothing else could. Could this encounter fracture your sense of self? The feeling of a continuous, unbroken stream of consciousness that defines our subjective experience might be shattered by meeting a distinct, separate you. It could lead to dissociation, a feeling of unreality, or a crisis of identity. Which you is the real one? Are both equally real? Does one have precedence? If your future self tells you something you vehemently disagree with, does that mean you will change your mind, or that they represent only one possible future you? The potential for cooperation or conflict is also rich. Imagine two versions of yourself working together, combining the experience of the older with the energy of the younger, pooling knowledge from different time periods to solve a problem. But just as easily, imagine conflict. Your older self might disapprove of your current choices. Your younger self might resent your future perceived failures or compromises. An argument with yourself across time would be the ultimate internal conflict made external. Could one version betray the other? Could one try to eliminate the other to prevent a future they despise, or to consolidate their own sense of being the prime version? How might the universe resolve such encounters? If the Novikov principle holds, perhaps meetings are possible, but significant causal disruption is not. Any information exchanged was always meant to be exchanged. Any actions taken were already part of the established timeline. The meeting happens, but changes nothing fundamental. It's just another event within the block universe. If many worlds is true, perhaps you can only ever meet versions of yourself from other timelines, mitigating direct paradox but raising questions about which you is truly yours. Or maybe the universe simply prevents such encounters through subtle means, ensuring paths never cross. The temporal doppelganger paradox, therefore, is more than just a causal puzzle, it's an existential one. It forces us to confront the nature of identity, the continuity of consciousness, the relationship between memory and self, and the unsettling possibility that our sense of being a unique, singular entity might be more fragile than we imagine. Encountering oneself across the corridors of time might be the ultimate journey into the uncanny, reflecting not just the paradoxes of time, but the deepest paradoxes of being. 1. The grandfather paradox. Imagine standing in front of a machine, not an ordinary machine, but something far grander. It hums with power, as though the very fabric of reality is wrapped within its metallic walls. The air around you vibrates, charged with possibilities, thick with the tension of what is about to happen. You feel the weight of every moment, every choice that led you to this point. You stand in front of the time machine, a marvel of technology, and you know You're about to cross into a world that exists only in dreams and in theory. The machine, sleek and imposing, sits before you. Its controls are numerous, dials that shift in mysterious ways, each one pointing to an era, a moment in time, perhaps even a moment in your own life, begging to be revisited. You can see the reflection of your own face in the polished metal, but for how long? How long until this world you know is forever changed? The feeling of anticipation is palpable, as if everything around you is on the brink of transformation. Time travel. It has always been a fascination, a dream that rests in the corners of the human imagination. It has inspired stories, theories, countless debates about the possibility of crossing through the veil of time. And now, here you are, the threshold of it all, the promise of undoing, of changing, of rewriting history itself lies within the grasp of your hands. You breathe deeply and step forward. A series of quick movements, familiar yet foreign. You adjust the dials, the clicking sound rings out as you set the machine's destination. Each turn, a choice, a decision to step into a time long past, a time where you can witness history with your own eyes. But not just any time, not just a random year in the past. You set the dial to 1940. You pause, something stirs within you. There's a strange magnetic pull to the year, a place you never thought you'd visit. It's not an arbitrary year. It's not random. It's a year tied to your own life, your very existence. You take a moment, just a breath, and you think, what if you could make a difference here? What if you could intervene? What if you could change something, however small, and rewrite everything that came after? But what would that change? What would happen to the world if you made the smallest shift, the slightest adjustment in history? You could stop the tide of time itself, but at what cost? The whirring of the machine intensifies, and you feel the familiar pull of space and time beginning to stretch. A strange sensation fills your chest, like gravity has shifted around you. You close your eyes for a moment. The air grows thick with energy. The faintest noise in the back of your mind, the sound of the universe itself turning on its axis. Then, all at once, the world around you shifts. The time machine hums one final time, and you open your eyes. A new world surrounds you. The buildings are different, more solid, grounded in a history far older than the one you left behind. The clothes people wear are simpler. The sounds they make are less hurried. The air smells different. The earth underfoot feels more permanent. There is a weight in the air, but it's not oppressive. It's the weight of memory, of 1,000 lives that came before yours, and 1,000 lives that will come after. You step forward, the world unfolding before you. This is not a dream. This is not a story. This is reality in the purest form, an untouched reality where every moment holds meaning. Every footstep is an echo of what came before. And there he is, your grandfather. He stands just across the street, a younger version of the man you know. The same face, but not yet weathered by time. He is so familiar, and yet so foreign. His presence strikes you like a gust of wind, familiar yet unfamiliar, all at once. He walks with a lightness, a carefree step that you know will be replaced with burden in the years to come. You watch him carefully, wondering how someone you know so well can seem so strange. He doesn't recognize you. How could he? You've never met, but you know him, don't you? This is the man who played such an important role in your life, the man who helped shape your world. This moment, this very moment, could change everything. You think of the stories, the family anecdotes, the times your parents told you about how your grandfather met your grandmother. The story is so vivid in your mind. They met by chance. A fleeting moment in a crowded marketplace, a glance, a smile, and suddenly their lives changed, and by extension, so did yours. But what if you could change that moment? What if, by the smallest of actions, you could rewrite the course of history? Your heart beats faster as the thought begins to take root in your mind. You stand still for a moment, observing him. There he is, your grandfather, as he was, as he would always be, had no one ever interfered. What if you stopped him? What if you prevented him from meeting your grandmother? It feels like the smallest change, just one tiny action. But is it truly small? Can one moment, one decision, one action reverberate through time so much that it erases your entire existence? Would you disappear if they never met? Would everything you know be wiped away in a single instant? You step forward, cautiously. Every step feels monumental. You're acutely aware of every movement, every breath. You are standing in a moment that could change everything. You approach your younger grandfather, and you feel the weight of history pressing down on your chest. You can feel it all, the gravity of time itself, the delicate threads that bind it all together. You reach him, and you stop. He notices you. For a moment, your eyes meet, and he gives you a confused smile. "Can I help you, young man?" he asks, his voice light, unfamiliar in its youth. You stop, unsure. The entire world seems to hold its breath. You don't know what to say. You hesitate. The reality of the situation crashes over you. You're standing in the past, and the smallest action could rewrite the future. But can you do it? Should you do it? You take a deep breath and speak. You ask him about something trivial, something that seems meaningless in this moment, but the act itself feels so significant. It's enough. The meeting never happens. Your grandmother never walks past, and your grandfather continues on his way. The connection between them is severed, a meeting that never takes place. For a moment, you stand there, frozen. The world around you doesn't change immediately, but something inside you knows that something has shifted. You've changed history. You've made a choice that echoes across time. The paradox has begun. You wait. Time doesn't bend to your will as quickly as you thought. There's no sudden disappearance, no grand moment where the universe collapses and remakes itself in your image. Instead, you stand there in the quiet stillness of the past, wondering if your choice will ever catch up with you. But it doesn't. The seconds tick by, and you're still there. You still exist. The paradox you've created doesn't seem to have erased you. You begin to question the very nature of the change you've made. What if time doesn't work the way you thought it did? What if, instead of rewriting itself, it simply adapts? What if the timeline, no matter what you do, will always find a way to preserve itself, to keep going? You wonder, is this the true nature of time? A vast, unyielding river that cannot be stopped, no matter how hard we try? You begin to feel the tension lift. The immediate rush of fear that you might disappear starts to fade, replaced by a strange calm. The paradox you've created lingers, but it no longer feels so pressing. Maybe time will correct itself. Maybe the change won't be as catastrophic as you feared. You look at the past. It's still the same. The people walk the same streets, breathe the same air, carry on with their lives as they always have. Nothing has changed, at least, not in the way you expected. But the universe, you realize, is a lot more complicated than that. You step back, the world around you continues, unaffected by the choice you've made, and yet a part of you knows it is. You can never know the full consequences of your actions. Time has a way of hiding those truths, of making sure that you don't see the ripples you've caused. And in that moment, you realize that the grandfather paradox is not simply about erasing existence. It's about the realization that time is far more fluid than we understand. A single change, no matter how small, ripples through the ages, but we may never see the full extent of it. Time may bend, but it doesn't break, not in the way you thought. As you stand there, lost in thought, the weight of the paradox finally lifts. You take a deep breath and step back toward the time machine. You've witnessed history, and now you're ready to return to your own time, a time where you may never know the true consequences of your actions. The grandfather paradox remains unanswered, but the questions linger in your mind, like soft whispers in the night. Perhaps, in the end, it is not about finding the answers, but about exploring the unknown. And for now, the journey must end here, at the edge of time, with the promise that no matter where you go, the paradox will always be with you, lurking in the shadows, waiting to be solved. The Let's Kill Hitler paradox, altering history. Let us return now to one of the most potent and frequently contemplated scenarios in the theoretical landscape of time travel, the attempt to alter history by removing a figure widely perceived as a catalyst for immense suffering. It's a specific application of the grandfather paradox's logic, but imbued with a powerful moral weight and far reaching consequences that resonate deeply with our collective memory of the 20th century. We speak, of course, of the Let's Kill Hitler paradox. The premise springs from a place of profound empathy and a desire to undo unimaginable horrors. Imagine possessing the means to journey back, perhaps to the tumultuous years of the Weimar Republic, before the National Socialist Party seized absolute control, before the world plunged into the abyss of a second global war, before the systematic, industrial scale murder of millions in the Holocaust commenced. The motivation feels overwhelmingly righteous to prevent this cascade of catastrophe, to save countless lives, to reshape a wounded century. The knowledge of what is to come, the images, the history books, the survivor testimonies, all this creates a heavy burden, a compelling urge to intervene, to wield temporal power as a scalpel to excise a malignancy from the timeline. It seems, on the surface, the most justifiable use of such extraordinary power. The journey itself would be freighted with an almost unbearable tension. The planning required, the calculation of the precise moment and method, the journey through time, arriving in a world unaware of the impending storm. Then, the act itself, locating the target, perhaps as a struggling artist, a fiery orator in a beer hall, or an aspiring politician? The confrontation, the execution of the plan. What would be the psychological toll on the traveler, acting as judge, jury, and executioner across time, even with the justification of preventing future atrocities? Could they live with the knowledge of what they had done, even if they believed it necessary? And here, even before considering the broader consequences, the first layer of paradox emerges, mirroring the logic of the grandfather paradox. If the mission succeeds, if Hitler is removed from the timeline early enough to prevent the specific events of World War II and the Holocaust as they transpired in our history, then the very knowledge and moral outrage that fueled the mission might cease to exist in the resultant timeline. Would a world that never experienced those specific horrors feel the same urgency to develop time travel for this exact purpose? Does the success of the mission retroactively erase its own genesis, creating that familiar loop of impossibility? Perhaps the general desire to prevent any large scale conflict would suffice as motivation, but the specific driving force tied to Hitler's known actions would be absent. Let us set aside that initial causal loop for a moment, however, and delve into the far deeper, more complex, and profoundly uncertain consequences that ripple outward from such a monumental alteration of history. Assume the traveler succeeds. Hitler is gone from the stage of history in, say, the late 1920s or early 1930s. What happens on Wednesday, let alone next year or next decade? The immediate aftermath in Germany would likely be chaotic. Hitler, despite his monstrous legacy, was a figure of significant charisma and political cunning who unified various factions on the far right. His removal wouldn't necessarily extinguish the forces he rode to power. The deep economic grievances following World War I, the humiliation felt by many Germans, the fragility of the Weimar democracy, the potent appeal of nationalism and authoritarianism, the pervasive anti Semitism, these elements remain. Who steps into the void? Does one of his rivals within the early Nazi Party, perhaps someone like Gregor Strasser or Ernst Röhm, depending on the timing, manage to seize control? Would their leadership lead down a similar path or a different one, perhaps focusing more on internal consolidation or a different flavor of ultranationalism? Could the removal of Hitler lead to infighting among extremist factions, potentially plunging Germany into civil war? Or perhaps, without Hitler's unifying presence, the far right splinters and fails to take power? Does this mean the Weimar Republic stabilizes and survives? Or does the instability swing towards the other extreme? Could a communist revolution, a significant fear in post WWI Germany, gain traction without the Nazis as a counterforce, potentially leading to a Soviet aligned Germany? The permutations are dizzying, and each carries the seed of entirely different future conflicts and alliances. How would Britain, France, a watchful Soviet Union under Stalin, and a relatively isolationist United States react to these alternative Germanys? The geopolitical chessboard is instantly reset, with utterly unpredictable outcomes. Beyond the immediate political fallout, we must confront the staggering implications of the butterfly effect. History is not a series of isolated events, but an incredibly intricate web of cause and effect. Removing a linchpin event like World War II or drastically altering its nature sends shockwaves through the entire system. Consider the technological landscape. Wabu 2 was a crucible for innovation, accelerating developments in countless fields under the intense pressure of conflict. Jet aircraft, radar systems, advancements in rocketry that led directly to the space race, the harnessing of nuclear energy, both for weapons and power, breakthroughs in cryptography that spurred early computing, the mass production techniques for vital medicines like penicillin, all were profoundly shaped or kickstarted by the war effort. If that specific war doesn't happen, does technological progress stall in certain areas or simply proceed down different, perhaps slower or faster, avenues? Does the space race occur? If so, when and driven by what? Does the nuclear age dawn differently, perhaps later, or perhaps more dangerously, without the stark lesson of Hiroshima and Nagasaki? What about the information age? So much of early computing was driven by wartime needs. A different history means a different technological present, potentially unrecognizable to us. Social and cultural changes are equally subject to this unpredictable cascade. The shared global trauma of Wabiwak led to the formation of institutions like the United Nations, aimed at preventing future conflicts. It reshaped empires, accelerating decolonization movements across Africa and Asia. It altered demographics through vast movements of people, both during and after the conflict. It influenced civil rights movements as marginalized groups who contributed to the war effort demanded greater equality. It fostered specific international alliances and rivalries that defined the latter half of the 20th century. Remove the cause, and all these specific effects are thrown into question. What replaces the UN? How does decolonization unfold? What new alliances and enmities shape the post alteration world? Then there is the profound moral calculus. The intention is to save millions from death camps and battlefields. But does the altered timeline guarantee a net positive outcome? Could the different conflicts that arise in the new history be even more devastating, perhaps involving widespread use of later developed, more destructive weapons? And what of the people who exist in our timeline because of Wabiwutu, the children and grandchildren of refugees, of soldiers who met spouses while stationed abroad, of populations shifted by the war's redrawing of borders? Successfully preventing Hitler's war means potentially erasing the existence of millions, perhaps billions, of individuals who make up our world, replacing them with a different set of souls in the new timeline. Is it ethically permissible to make such a trade, effectively sacrificing one set of lives for another, especially when the outcome is so uncertain? It raises uncomfortable questions about historical necessity, the idea that even horrific events can sometimes be crucibles from which unforeseen positive developments eventually emerge, or which prevent even worse alternative futures. This is not to justify atrocity, but to acknowledge the terrifying complexity of historical causation that the time traveler presumes to override. How do our theoretical models cope with such a monumental change? If the Novikov self consistency principle governs, the mission is doomed from the start. every attempt fails. The time machine malfunctions, the traveler is apprehended, an accident prevents reaching the target. Or, in a darkly ironic twist, the traveler's actions inadvertently help Hitler consolidate power or escape an earlier assassination attempt that in the original timeline almost succeeded. History, in this view, is unchangeably robust. If the many worlds interpretation applies, the traveler does succeed, but only by splitting off a new universe. Timeline A continues with Hitler, World War II, and the history we know. Timeline B, created by the intervention, proceeds without him, developing into an entirely different world. The traveler has saved a world, but not their own, and is now stranded in this alternate reality, perhaps bearing the psychological weight of knowing their original world still suffers, and uncertain if the new world they've created is truly better or merely different, with its own unique set of tragedies and triumphs unfolding. If the block universe model holds true, the journey is purely observational. The traveler arrives in the past, witnesses the rise of Nazism, perhaps even sees Hitler himself, but is utterly powerless to change a single predetermined event. They are a ghost haunting history, bearing witness to the unfolding horror, perhaps tormented by their foreknowledge and inability to act. The past is fixed, immutable, a static landscape they can only visit. And if the temporal erosion paradox holds weight, attempting such a massive alteration could critically destabilize the timeline itself. The intervention might not lead to a coherent new history, but rather to increasing temporal static, causal breakdowns, and unpredictable chaos, making the outcome far worse than either the original history or the intended, corrected version. The cure becomes worse than the disease. The let's kill Hitler paradox, therefore, transcends a simple causal loop. It becomes a profound meditation on the interconnectedness of history, the limits of intervention, the dangers of unintended consequences, and the immense difficulty of judging the past or predicting the future. It suggests that changing history is not like editing a manuscript, removing a problematic character, but more like trying to divert a massive, complex river. The results are likely to be uncontrollable flooding, unpredictable new channels, and the creation of unforeseen swamps rather than a neat, tidy improvement. It stands as a cautionary tale against the seductive idea that we could easily fix the past if only we had the power, reminding us that the threads of time may be far more interwoven and resilient, or perhaps fragile and chaotic, than we can possibly comprehend. 2. The bootstrap paradox. Imagine a book lying on your desk, an object that seems almost too perfect, too strange. Its cover is plain, without any title or author's name, yet it seems to pulse with an energy, a quiet whisper of something immense, something vast. You reach for it, a deep sense of curiosity rising within you as your fingers brush its surface. There is something inexplicable about this book. It doesn't belong to this world, at least, not in the way anything else does. You feel as if it's a relic from a time you can barely comprehend, a bridge between worlds, a connection to the farthest reaches of possibility. You open it. The pages are pristine, untouched, a testament to time and care that is not of your era. You begin to read, your eyes scanning over the text. It starts with simple concepts, things that make sense, that seem plausible. But then, as you turn the pages, the knowledge in the book becomes increasingly complex. The theories are far beyond anything your world has yet to understand. Advanced mathematics, quantum physics, philosophies that challenge the very fabric of reality. Each page you turn is like a doorway to new dimensions of thought, and as you read, you feel yourself slipping deeper and deeper into a world where anything is possible. As the days go on, you can't put the book down. Your mind races as you work through its contents. The equations are daunting at first, but as you continue, the patterns reveal themselves to you slowly, like pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. The theories you once thought impossible now seem undeniable. This book contains knowledge that would take humanity centuries to unravel. It holds the secrets of the universe far beyond what anyone could imagine, far beyond even the brightest minds of your time. You begin to wonder, if this knowledge were shared with the world, what would happen? Would it create a new era of progress, a leap forward into a future humanity can barely dream of? You become consumed with the idea. The world needs this knowledge. The people, the scientists, the innovators, they all need to see this. You begin to make plans, but not just any plans. This is knowledge that cannot be kept in a drawer, hidden away. No, this knowledge must be shared, must be made public. It is too important. It holds the potential to cure diseases, to eliminate the need for fossil fuels, to end hunger. It holds the key to unlocking the deepest mysteries of the universe. So you begin the process of sharing it. You start by writing down your understanding, refining the knowledge so that others can follow your path, and then, once it's perfected, you publish it. At first, the response is quiet. There are whispers in the academic community, curiosity building slowly but steadily. But as the book spreads, the impact begins to grow. Scholars, physicists, and thinkers across the globe dive into the text, unraveling its secrets. It's revolutionary. It changes everything. The world, already in motion, accelerates even faster. People start building the technologies described within its pages. Cures for diseases thought to be incurable appear. New forms of energy are harnessed better than any before. It is as if the book has opened a door to a new era of human civilization. The book becomes an icon, its influence growing in ways that no one could have predicted. It reshapes society itself. Years pass. Decades, centuries, the book becomes more than just a text. It is foundational. It is taught in schools, studied in universities, built upon, expanded upon. Its knowledge has transformed the world. The world is no longer the same. It is advanced beyond the limits of what you had ever imagined. It is a different place, a better place. People have learned to live in harmony with nature, with the earth. Technology has progressed at an astonishing rate. Life expectancy has increased, diseases have been eradicated, and education is universal. You witness in your lifetime the dawning of a new age. You feel immense pride, knowing that this book, this humble book you found, is at the heart of it all. It has shaped the world for the better, but time passes, and your story is eventually lost to the sands of history. Generations come and go, and the world continues to evolve. And one day, centuries from now, you find yourself back in the future. You stand in a room in a distant era, staring at a worn and weathered version of the very same book. It's in the same place, the same condition as the one you discovered all those years ago. The book looks like it has been passed down through generations, its pages now frayed and yellowed with age. But there's no doubt about it. This is the same book. You open it slowly, your heart racing. You know what you will find, but you can't help but feel a strange sense of anticipation. As you flip through the pages, everything you remember is there. The same words, the same knowledge, the same theories, equations, and ideas. You've seen it all before. But now, in this distant future, you realize something that stops you cold. Who wrote this book? The question lingers in your mind like a seed that has suddenly been planted, and with each turn of the page, it grows. You remember writing it, you remember discovering it, and then publishing it. But in this new time where you haven't yet arrived, who could have written it? You pause, feeling the weight of the paradox sink into you. This is the bootstrap paradox, a riddle that seems to warp the very essence of time and causality. The book exists because you found it. But how can you have found it if it wasn't there to begin with? The knowledge in the book is advanced beyond anything anyone could have possibly known at your time. Yet it is a part of the future you have already influenced. You stop and think for a moment, your mind racing. If you hadn't written this book, if you hadn't discovered it, would the world have progressed the way it did? Could the future, a future where technology, society, and even the very foundation of knowledge has been altered, have existed without your discovery? If you hadn't been the one to publish it, if it hadn't been handed down to generations, would the knowledge have ever existed in the first place? You realize that the knowledge in this book has no true origin. It loops back on itself, passed through time in an endless cycle. There is no true creator. The knowledge exists because you discovered it, and you discovered it because it was already there, passed back to you from the future. The future and the past are locked in a loop, each influencing the other, but neither able to claim the title of origin. This is the essence of the bootstrap paradox. The paradox causes you to question everything you know about the universe. Can something exist without an origin? Can knowledge, or even an object, exist in a state where it is created by the future but never has a true creator? The paradox shatters your understanding of time, causality, and the very nature of existence. But there is more. The paradox is not just a theoretical curiosity, it has real world implications. What if, in some distant future, an advanced civilization discovered this book, learned from it, and then traveled back in time to share it with you? The knowledge could perpetuate itself, an infinite cycle that ensures the book's existence without a true author. Could the universe itself operate in this way? Could time itself be nothing more than a continuous loop, a feedback loop where the past and future feed into each other, constantly creating and recreating themselves? The bootstrap paradox makes you realize that perhaps the universe does not have a definitive origin, no clear point of creation. Perhaps the universe, like the book, exists in a continuous loop. Maybe everything we see, every event, every choice is part of a grand cycle, one that loops back into itself without ever truly beginning or ending. The implications of this are staggering. If the universe operates in this way, then where did it come from? Where does it go? The paradox forces you to confront the idea that the universe may not be as simple as we think. It's not a linear progression of time, but something far more intricate. It's a web of causes and effects, all interwoven, each moment influencing the next, and yet none of them truly having an origin. As you sit there, staring at the book, you feel a sense of unease. Time, causality, existence, they all seem less certain now. And yet, despite the confusion, you also feel a strange sense of peace. Some mysteries may never be solved, some paradoxes will remain unanswered, but in that uncertainty, there is beauty. The universe may be a mystery, a puzzle that can never be fully solved, but that doesn't make it any less fascinating. You close the book and set it down gently. The bootstrap paradox lingers in your mind, but for now, you let it rest. Some questions, you realize, are meant to be pondered, not answered. The paradox is a part of the journey, a riddle that will remain unsolved, but one that will always be with you. The book is closed, but the mystery is just beginning. 3. The paradox of the unexpected hanging. Imagine yourself sitting in a small, solitary cell. The stone walls are cold and unyielding, but they offer a strange sense of comfort. The room is dimly lit, a soft light filtering through a narrow window high above you. It's a quiet, peaceful place, almost too peaceful. The air is still, and you can hear nothing but the rhythm of your breath as it rises and falls. With each inhale, your body relaxes further, and with each exhale, the quiet stillness of the room seeps deeper into your mind. It's almost as though time has slowed, allowing you to simply exist in the moment, with nothing to do but reflect. The world outside your cell feels distant, as if it has drifted far away from you. You feel a gentle calm settle over you, the weight of your surroundings comforting in its stillness. There is no rushing here, no urgency, only the quiet hum of time moving forward, unnoticed, like the slow trickle of a stream through a silent forest. Your thoughts, once filled with anxiety and fear, now move slowly, gently. They too are in no rush. As you sit there, your mind drifts to the warden's decree. The words were simple, yet they have haunted you since the moment they were spoken. You will be hanged at noon on a weekday next week. The warden's voice had been calm, but the words left a strange feeling of unease in the pit of your stomach. However, he continued, the execution will be a surprise. You will not know the day of your hanging until it happens. His eyes had met yours as he said this, and for a moment you wondered if there was some hidden meaning behind his words. The more you thought about it, the more perplexed you became. How could it be a surprise if you already knew it would happen? And if you knew it would happen, then it couldn't be a surprise, could it? The more you reasoned through the situation, the more it seemed like a puzzle that needed solving, a mystery that could be unraveled with enough thought. But as you pondered the warden's words, you began to realize that you too were caught in a paradox that seemed to dance just beyond your understanding. At first, the idea of a surprise execution seemed like an impossible concept. How could something be a surprise if you knew it was coming? But then, as you allowed the thought to settle into your mind, something more profound began to unfold. Could it be that you could predict the day of your death? Could it be that, through the power of logic, you could figure out when the execution would happen and therefore take away the surprise? The more you thought about it, the more certain you became that you could outwit this strange situation. It was all just a matter of reasoning. You just needed to follow the steps and find the answer. You begin your analysis with Friday, the last possible day for the hanging. If you are still alive by Thursday night, then the hanging must take place on Friday. But wait, if you know that Friday is the only remaining day, then it won't be a surprise. The very fact that you know it's coming means it can't be the day. Friday is ruled out. You pause, taking a moment to let this realization settle in. Then, with calm assurance, you move on to Thursday. The same logic applies. If you are still alive by Wednesday night, then Thursday must be the last possible day. But once again, you see the problem. If you know that Thursday is the last day, then it cannot be a surprise either. Thursday is ruled out. You begin to feel a quiet satisfaction as your reasoning unfolds, each step guiding you closer to the conclusion that the hanging simply cannot occur. You continue your analysis, methodically considering each remaining day. Wednesday, impossible. Tuesday, also ruled out. Monday, the first possible day? That too becomes increasingly unlikely. The more you reason through it, the clearer the picture becomes. There is no day that could fulfill the warden's decree. Each possibility falls away like the softest whisper in the wind, fading gently into the background. By the end of this mental exercise, you are certain the hanging cannot happen at all. The paradox has been solved. Time moves on, but you remain free from the warden's decree. A sense of relief washes over you as you lean back against the cold stone wall, the weight of the mystery lifted from your shoulders. For now, you are at peace. You have solved the puzzle, and with that solution comes a quiet assurance that you will not be hanged. The future, once uncertain, now feels clear. You have worked through the problem, and your mind is calm. There is nothing left to fear, but as the days pass, the world begins to shift in ways that you didn't expect. It's Wednesday. The air feels different today, heavier somehow, as if something is about to change. The stillness of your cell, once a comforting presence, now feels more like an unspoken tension, the kind of silence that comes just before the storm. Your body remains relaxed, but your mind is alert, aware of the subtle shift that's taking place. At noon, there's a sound, the soft creak of the door opening. Footsteps approach, deliberate and measured. Your heart beats a little faster now, not out of fear, but from the sudden realization that the paradox you had solved is now unfolding in ways you couldn't have anticipated. The hangman enters, and you rise from your place on the floor, your body moving in a slow, measured way as you prepare to meet the inevitable. There is no panic, no rush, only a quiet acceptance of what is happening. The rope tightens around your neck, and the floor beneath you gives way. You feel the gentle weight of the world shift, but not in the way you had expected. The execution is both inevitable and, in its own way, a total surprise. The paradox, so clearly unraveled in your mind, has now unfolded in reality, and you realize with quiet clarity that you have been wrong all along. This is the paradox of the unexpected hanging, a gentle riddle that quietly challenges everything you thought you understood. The prisoner's reasoning, though flawless in its logic, could not account for the unpredictability of life itself. The more he thought he could control the situation, the more vulnerable he became to the very surprise he had tried to avoid. The paradox teaches us that no matter how confident we are in our understanding, life can still surprise us in ways we never expect. As you reflect on the paradox, you begin to understand that the true nature of it is not about logic or reasoning. It's about the unpredictable nature of reality itself. The paradox exists not because the prisoner made a mistake, but because life, in its essence, cannot be fully predicted or controlled. No matter how much we think we know, there will always be things beyond our comprehension, things that will unfold in ways we could never have imagined. You begin to feel a sense of peace in this realization. The paradox, though unresolved in some ways, has brought you to a quiet understanding of the world. It shows us that there is beauty in uncertainty, that not knowing is a part of the journey. The future, once something to be feared, becomes a place of quiet acceptance. It is no longer something to control or predict, but something to experience as it unfolds. With that understanding, you feel your body relax even further, your breath slowing with the rhythm of time. The paradox has no more weight on your mind. You no longer need to solve it because you've accepted it. You've accepted that life is full of surprises, and that's okay. The future will come as it will, but you don't need to know how or when. All you need to do is be present in the moment, to let time carry you through without resistance. You settle into that peace, the quiet calm that surrounds you. You feel your body grow heavy, your mind drifting. Time continues on, but you are no longer concerned with what comes next. The paradox of the unexpected hanging, once a puzzle that filled your thoughts, now fades into the background. The only thing left is the gentle rhythm of your breath, the soft embrace of time, and the peace that comes from knowing that not everything needs to be solved. Sometimes, the best way to move forward is simply to let go. The paradox rests in your mind, like a soft whisper that will always linger, but it no longer demands your attention. You let it rest as you drift deeper, deeper into relaxation, letting the soothing weight of the moment carry you into sleep. The future is unknown, but that's part of the journey, and for now, that's enough. 4. Zeno's Paradox. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a room, preparing to walk across it. The room is quiet, the air still, and there's a soft, almost imperceptible hum of calmness around you. The floor beneath your feet is smooth, cool, and firm. The walls around you are made of stone, much like the cell you just left behind. The simplicity of it all is soothing, and the quiet hum of your breath fills the space. You stand there at the threshold, and you take a slow, deep breath. It's a familiar feeling, the anticipation of taking that first step, the simplicity of the task ahead, walking across the room. It's something you've done 1,000 times before. You shift your weight slightly, your muscles moving with grace as you prepare for that first step. But then something strange happens. As you take your first step forward, you're told that in order to reach the other side of the room, you must first reach the halfway point. You stop. The idea seems simple enough. Of course, you must reach the halfway point first. But then the thought comes. In order to reach the halfway point, you must first reach the halfway point of that, and the halfway point of that, and so on. The idea continues over and over. There will always be a smaller and smaller halfway point ahead of you, stretching forever into the distance. The more you think about it, the more you realize you can never truly reach the other side. There will always be another halfway point, another step, just beyond your reach. And in that realization, the room itself seems to stretch and shrink at the same time, as if the task ahead of you is impossibly simple and impossibly difficult. You're left standing and playing, wondering, can motion really happen at all? Can you ever truly cross a room, or is it simply an illusion, an impossibility wrapped in the logic of time and space? This, in its simplest form, is Zeno's paradox, one of the most famous paradoxes in history, and it begins with a seemingly simple question. How can you move across a room if, in order to do so, you must first cover half the distance, and then, to cover the remaining distance, you must first cover half of that, and then half of what remains? The process continues infinitely. If every step requires a division of space, how can motion occur at all? The paradox, at first glance, seems absurd. After all, we know that we can walk across a room without trouble. We move forward, step by step, and eventually we reach the other side. But Zeno's paradox challenges our understanding of motion, of time, and of infinity. It asks us to imagine a world where every action, every movement, requires an infinite series of smaller actions. If an infinite number of steps must be taken before you can even begin to reach the other side of the room, then how can movement, as we understand it, even exist? You take a moment to consider the logic of Zeno's paradox. Each step you take is a smaller fraction of the whole, and in theory, there are infinite fractions to be covered. But still, you are able to walk across the room. You may have taken an infinite number of steps in theory, but you have still managed to reach your destination in a finite amount of time. What does that mean? Does it mean that Zeno was wrong, that the paradox is just a product of flawed reasoning? Or does it mean that there is something deeper, something more fundamental about time, space, and motion that we don't fully understand? As you contemplate this, you feel a soft weight settle over you, as if the paradox itself is sinking into your consciousness. The room, once simple and familiar, now feels like a place where infinite possibilities exist. Each step forward, though seemingly small, carries with it the weight of an infinite journey. But paradoxically, you are able to take that journey step by step without even realizing it. This paradox leads us to consider the nature of motion itself. If space is divided infinitely, how can we ever truly arrive at our destination? Zeno's paradox questions the very nature of reality, challenging us to consider whether motion is a true continuous phenomenon or merely an illusion, a construct of our perception. Perhaps the paradox is not just about walking across a room, but about the way we understand time and space. Could it be that the way we experience reality is merely an approximation of a deeper, more complex truth? You begin to feel a soft sense of unease, as though the simple act of walking across the room has become a far more complex and mysterious endeavor. The idea of infinity stretching out in front of you like a vast, unending horizon feels both comforting and unsettling. You realize that this paradox doesn't just exist in the abstract, in the realm of thought experiments. It exists in every moment, in every step, in every breath. Every time you take a step, you're engaging in a process that involves infinite divisions, infinite possibilities. Each step, though small, is part of a larger whole that cannot be fully grasped or understood. Time itself feels like it is stretched thin, like a thread that connects infinite moments together, each one leading to the next. You begin to wonder if motion is not just a linear progression, but a series of tiny, discrete moments, each one contained within the next. Could time be more like a series of snapshots, frozen moments of experience, each one contributing to the next, but never fully graspable on its own? You breathe deeply, letting the weight of these questions settle into your mind. The paradox, with all its complexities and contradictions, lingers in the quiet corners of your thoughts. It is no longer just a riddle to be solved, but a reminder that the world around you is far more intricate than you ever realized. The idea of infinity, of an endless series of steps, becomes less a problem to solve and more a contemplation of existence itself. And then, as you let the paradox wash over you, you begin to realize something important. Motion, like life, is not about reaching the destination, but about the journey itself. The paradox doesn't deny motion, it simply reminds us of the complexity of the process. Each step we take, each breath we inhale, is part of an infinite series of moments, yet we move forward with ease. The paradox doesn't contradict our experience, it deepens it. It opens up new layers of understanding, new ways of seeing the world around us. The room, which once felt like a simple space, now feels infinite. The walls stretch beyond the horizon of your perception, and the floor beneath you feels like an unending path. Each step forward is part of a journey that stretches out into eternity, yet you move with ease. There is a strange sense of peace in this realization. The paradox of infinity, of infinite divisions, is not something to fear. It is simply a reminder that life is more than we perceive it to be, more complex, more beautiful. As you stand there, still, feeling the weight of the paradox and the room around you, you allow yourself to sink deeper into the present moment. The space, the air, the infinite steps that lie ahead, they all blur together into one peaceful, calming whole. You realize that the paradox, like so many things in life, doesn't need to be solved. It is enough simply to experience it, to be present with it, and with that, you feel the gentle pull of sleep. The paradox, once a mental riddle, fades into the background of your thoughts. The complexity of motion, of time, of infinity is now a soft whisper that lingers at the edge of your mind. You let go of the need to understand it all. You let go of the questions, the thoughts, the paradoxes that fill your mind. For now, you can simply rest. You take a deep breath, and with each exhale, you feel yourself drifting further and further into peaceful, restful sleep. The paradox will remain, just as it always has, but for now, it is enough to simply exist in the quiet calm of the present moment. Time stretches out infinitely, but you do not need to understand it. You simply need to be. And with that, you close your eyes, feeling the soft weight of sleep settling over you. 5. The Liar Paradox. Imagine yourself in a quiet, peaceful room, one that feels like a safe retreat from the world outside. The walls are soft and neutral, calming in their simplicity. The air is still, cool, and gentle, wrapping around you like a comforting blanket. The only sound is your breathing, slow and steady, creating a rhythm that matches the calm of the space around you. You feel yourself sinking deeper into relaxation, letting go of all the thoughts that have been pulling at you, letting your mind drift quietly as you sit in stillness. As you sit there, comfortable and at ease, a strange thought begins to surface. A simple, unassuming sentence appears in your mind. This statement is false. At first, the words seem harmless enough, a small riddle, a fleeting thought. But as your mind lingers on the sentence, something begins to shift. You feel the calmness around you begin to change, just slightly, as you turn the sentence over in your mind. If the statement is true, then it must be false, because that is what it says. But if it is false, then it must be true. The logic begins to twist in a way that feels both subtle and unsettling. You can't quite pin it down. The more you think about it, the more the sentence pulls you into its paradox. It feels like an endless loop, a gentle cycle that keeps turning back on itself, never fully resolving. You sit there quietly, allowing the paradox to unfold in your mind. At first, it feels like a simple puzzle, something you might solve with a little more thought. But the more you focus, the more you realize that this paradox is not something that can be solved. It's not a puzzle that has an answer. It is a riddle that exists in the space between logic and contradiction, in the space where the usual rules don't apply. As the paradox deepens, you feel a soft curiosity rising within you. How is it possible for a sentence to be both true and false at the same time? It seems impossible, yet the more you think about it, the more it feels inevitable. The sentence holds both truths and falsehoods, and no matter how much you try to unravel them, they remain tangled together. The more you attempt to understand it, the less certain you become. The more your mind tries to work through it, the more elusive the answer seems. And yet, there's a strange beauty in it. In that moment of confusion, there is a quiet peace, an understanding that not all things need to be resolved. The paradox itself is a reminder that not everything in the world can be easily understood. There are things, ideas, and concepts that exist outside of our normal understanding, things that simply cannot be captured by logic alone. You breathe slowly, letting the weight of the paradox settle over you. There's no need to rush to an answer, no need to resolve the contradiction. You simply sit with it, allowing it to be, allowing it to exist as it is. The paradox doesn't need to be untangled or solved. It simply exists in its own space, its own time. In the quiet of the room, you realize that this paradox is not just about the sentence, it's about the nature of truth itself. What is truth, really? Is it something that can be pinned down, something that we can always understand and categorize? Or is truth something more fluid, something that can shift and change depending on how we look at it? The paradox is asking you to question the very nature of truth and falsehood. It's asking you to consider that perhaps truth isn't always as clear cut as we think. The more you sit with the paradox, the more you begin to see the world in a different way. The statement, this statement is false, seems like a small thing, but it holds within it a larger truth. Sometimes things don't make sense. Sometimes things don't follow the rules we expect. And that's okay. The world is full of contradictions, of moments that don't fit neatly into the boxes we try to put them in. But perhaps that's what makes life so interesting, so rich. The paradox teaches us that the world is not always predictable, not at always understandable. It's full of mysteries, full of things that we may never fully grasp. You let that realization settle into your mind like a soft weight that helps you sink deeper into relaxation. You don't need to figure it out. You don't need to solve the paradox. It's enough to simply acknowledge it, to sit with it, to allow it to exist without needing to control it. And in that acceptance, there's a peaceful release. The paradox of the liar statement also speaks to the limitations of logic itself. We rely on logic to understand the world around us, to make sense of our experiences, to navigate our lives. But logic is not always enough. It can only take us so far. There are things that simply cannot be explained with logic, things that are beyond our comprehension. The liar paradox is a reminder that logic, though powerful, has its limits. There are moments in life when logic will fail us, when it cannot provide the answers we seek. And yet, in that failure, there is a kind of freedom. The paradox does not have to be solved, it can simply exist. And in that simplicity, there is a peaceful acceptance. You don't need to chase after answers. You don't need to untangle every riddle. Life is full of mysteries, full of questions that may never be answered. But that doesn't make life any less meaningful. In fact, it might make it all the more beautiful. You feel your body relax even more, the weight of the paradox fading into the background of your thoughts. There is no need to resolve anything. There is no need to solve the contradictions. The paradox can exist as it is, and that's okay. It is part of the rhythm of the world, part of the flow of thought that comes and goes, like waves in the ocean. Some waves are calm, others are turbulent, but they all pass. And the paradox, like all things, will pass too. With each slow breath, you allow the paradox to fade deeper into the background. It no longer feels urgent. It no longer feels like something that needs to be solved. It simply is, and that is enough. You allow yourself to let go of the need to understand it, to resolve it, to make sense of it. There is peace in that release. There is comfort in knowing that not everything needs to be understood. Some things simply exist, and in that existence there is beauty. You take a deep, slow breath, feeling the calmness of the room wrap itself around you. The paradox is still there, but it no longer demands your attention. It no longer pulls at your mind. Instead, it becomes a quiet background thought, like the hum of the world outside, present, but not intrusive. You don't need to understand it. You don't need to figure it out. It simply is. And as you allow the paradox to rest, you feel yourself drifting deeper into relaxation. Your mind becomes quiet, still, at peace. There is no need to chase after answers, no need to solve every riddle. Sometimes, simply being with the mystery is enough. And as you sink deeper into the calm, the world outside fades away, leaving only the peaceful, restful stillness of the moment. The paradox, like all things, has become part of the rhythm of your thoughts. You let go of the need to solve it, and in doing so, you find peace. The paradox, the questions, the mysteries, they can all exist in the background of your mind, like soft whispers that come and go. You don't need to chase them. You can simply rest. And as you breathe deeply, letting your mind drift and settle, you realize that life, much like the paradox, doesn't always need to make sense. Some things will remain unanswered, and that is okay. It is enough simply to experience them, to let them be. And with that peaceful realization, you let go, letting the paradox fade into the quiet background of your thoughts as you drift into the soft embrace of sleep. 6. The Ship of Theseus. Paradox. Imagine yourself standing by the ocean. The air is fresh, carrying the scent of salt and seaweed, the waves crashing softly against the shore. The sun is low in the sky, casting long, golden reflections across the water. The world around you is still, as if time itself is slowing down, giving you a moment to simply be. You feel the cool breeze brushing against your face, your body fully relaxed in the warmth of the late afternoon light. As you stand there, your gaze drifts across the horizon where a large ship is anchored, its sails billowing gently in the wind. It's a ship like no other, strong, weathered, and ancient. Its wooden hull gleams in the light, a testament to its long history. This ship, you know, is the ship of Theseus, an iconic vessel with a long and storied past. It has been through countless voyages, carrying explorers, traders, and adventurers across vast seas. But as you watch the ship, something strange begins to happen. You notice, with quiet curiosity, that some of the wooden planks of the ship are being replaced. One by one, pieces of the ship are carefully removed and replaced with new ones, polished and fresh. The process is slow, deliberate, almost meditative. It's a strange sight, yet there is something peaceful about it. The ship is being repaired, restored, made whole again. You watch as the workers replace the damaged parts, their movements calm, their actions precise. As the hours pass, the ship undergoes a transformation. Every plank, every mast, every sail is eventually replaced. Over time, the entire ship is rebuilt from the ground up. The old, worn materials are discarded and new ones take their place. The ship of Theseus is now entirely new, but it still remains the same ship in name and purpose. It still carries the same legacy, the same spirit as the ship that once sailed the seas. And yet, something feels different now. You stand there, still watching, and you begin to wonder Is this still the same ship? It looks identical in every way, yet all of its parts have been replaced. The original pieces are gone, the ones that carried the ship through the storms and across the oceans. The ship is now made entirely of new materials, pieces that have never touched the sea. So, is it still the ship of Theseus, or has it become something else entirely? Has it lost its identity in the process of being rebuilt? The question lingers in your mind, as soft and persistent as the ocean breeze. The paradox quietly unfolds before you, pulling at the edges of your understanding. If every part of something is replaced, does it still remain the same? Is identity tied to the physical materials that make up something, or is it something deeper, something that goes beyond the individual parts? As you continue to ponder, another thought arises. Imagine now that the old pieces of the ship, the original planks, are gathered together. They are carefully reassembled piece by piece until another ship is formed. This new ship is made entirely of the original materials of the ship of Theseus. It looks identical to the old ship in every way. It carries the same history, the same memories, and yet it is not the original ship. It is something new, a ship made from the very materials that were replaced in the first ship. Now you are faced with a second question. Which ship is the real ship of Theseus? The one that has been rebuilt from new materials, or the one made from the original pieces? If identity is tied to the materials, then the second ship, made of the original planks, could be seen as the true ship of Theseus. But if identity is tied to continuity and purpose, then the first ship, the one that has been restored and rebuilt, could be considered the real ship of Theseus. As you let these thoughts flow through your mind, you begin to realize that the ship of Theseus paradox is not just about ships, but about identity itself. What makes something truly itself? Is it the sum of its parts, or is it something more intangible, something that exists beyond the physical? The paradox challenges our understanding of what it means to be the same, to be whole, and to have continuity. It raises questions about change, transformation, and the passage of time. You feel the weight of these questions settle over you, and for a moment, the world around you seems to pause. The ocean, once so vast and full of motion, now feels still. The gentle breeze feels softer, as though it, too, is considering the paradox, allowing it to linger in the air for just a little longer. The ship, though rebuilt, still rests on the water, waiting for its next journey, its next adventure. But the journey of identity, of continuity, is not as simple as the ship's voyage. It is a journey that requires reflection, a deep look into the very nature of what it means to exist. The sun begins to set, casting a soft glow across the horizon. You take a slow, deep breath, feeling the cool evening air fill your lungs. The paradox, though complex, has begun to settle into your mind in a different way. You no longer feel the need to solve it, to find a definitive answer. The paradox is not something that needs to be resolved. It is a question to be explored, a riddle to be pondered, but not necessarily solved. And in that quiet realization, you feel a soft peace. You let go of the need for an answer. You don't need to know if the ship is the same or different. You don't need to know which ship is the real, ship of Theseus. What matters is the journey, the process of transformation, of change, and of growth. The ship, like everything in life, is not static. It evolves, it shifts, it adapts, and in that evolution, it remains itself even as it changes. The paradox of the ship of Theseus serves as a reminder that identity is not a fixed thing. It is fluid, like the waves of the ocean, constantly shifting, constantly evolving. We too change over time. Our bodies, our thoughts, and even our memories shift as we grow, but at the same time, we remain ourselves. The essence of who we are, the core of our being, stays the same even as we change. You stand there, quietly contemplating the paradox, letting the questions settle in your mind. There is no rush, no need to find an answer right away. The paradox exists in the space between what we know and what we can never fully understand. It is a part of the mystery of life itself, a reminder that some things cannot be fully explained but are still worthy of contemplation. And as you stand by the ocean, watching the ship sway gently with the waves, you realize that perhaps the most important thing is not the answer, but the journey of exploration itself. With that, you take a deep breath, letting the sound of the waves and the cool breeze wash over you. The world around you feels calm, peaceful, and accepting. You don't need to know the answers. You can simply be, in this moment, surrounded by the mystery, the beauty, and the paradox of life. And in that moment, you find peace. 7. Quantum immortality paradox. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a vast, quiet landscape, surrounded by the soft rustle of the wind and the calm stillness of nature. The world around you is vast, stretching out in all directions, and yet it feels familiar, like you've been here before. The land is empty and endless, the horizon stretching far beyond what you can see, like a dream that you can never quite reach. The air is cool and crisp, the faintest hint of something electric in the atmosphere. It's a place where time doesn't seem to matter, where everything feels infinite. In this stillness, you feel the presence of something, something far beyond your understanding. There is a hum in the air, a subtle vibration that you can't quite place. It's like the very fabric of reality itself is shifting, bending ever so slightly, and you can feel it deep in your chest, as though you are connected to something much larger than yourself. You stand there, waiting, in that quiet space between moments, and you begin to wonder, what if everything you've known about existence is only a part of a larger, more complex truth? What if time and death, the very things that govern life, are not as fixed as you've always thought? You take a slow breath, and suddenly the quiet begins to shift. You hear a soft sound, almost imperceptible at first, a slight clicking, like a switch being flipped. And then, in an instant, you find yourself in another place, another version of the landscape. It's the same, but different. The air is cooler now, the wind a little stronger, and the colors of the world seem just slightly off, as if the world has changed in some small but significant way. You look around and realize that something has shifted. It's as if time itself has bent, and you've entered into a version of reality that exists just a little outside of the one you were in before. the realization settles slowly into your mind. This is no ordinary world. This is a world shaped by the very fabric of existence, one where the rules of reality don't always apply. This is the space of the quantum immortality paradox, where death and life, time and existence are not as separate as they seem. It's a place where everything exists in a state of possibility, where every event that can happen does happen across multiple timelines, across infinite versions of the universe. The paradox begins with a question. What if, in some reality, you never truly die? What if, when faced with death, you are not simply erased from existence, but instead you move into another reality, one where you continue to live, one where you always find a way to survive? In that moment of danger, when you think your life might end, what if instead the universe simply shifts, creating a new branch of reality where you survive no matter the odds? As you stand in this space, you begin to feel the weight of the question. If the universe is infinite and every possibility plays out somewhere, then in at least one version of reality, you will always survive. Even in the most unlikely of circumstances, when all logic points to your end, there will be a version of you where survival is the outcome. And in that version, you will live on, forever moving through realities where death never truly comes. You begin to wonder, what would it be like to never experience death? What if every time you came close to the end, the universe simply reshuffled itself, bringing you into a new version where you are still alive? Would it be a life of endless survival, of constant second chances? Or would it be something more, something deeper, something more unsettling? In this moment of stillness, you realize that the true nature of this paradox is not about immortality in the traditional sense. It's not about avoiding death altogether. It's about the way the universe handles your survival, about the infinite ways in which you continue to live, even when it seems impossible. You begin to see it as a vast, interconnected web of possibilities, each one reaching out in different directions, each one a potential life where you live on, no matter what happens. As you stand there, the landscape around you shifts again. It's as though time itself is stretching, folding over, and expanding in ways that you cannot quite grasp. The air becomes heavier, filled with an energy that hums, vibrating through your very core. You feel a slight pull, a subtle shift in the air, and in that moment, you are reminded of the Schrodinger's cat paradox. It's a familiar thought experiment, a cat in a box, alive and dead at the same time, until you observe it. In that moment of observation, the universe splits, and one version of the cat is alive, while the other is dead. But what if, instead of dying, you too continue to live? What if every time you face death, the universe simply splits, creating a new version of reality where you survive? The possibilities stretch out before you, infinite and boundless. Every decision, every action leads to another reality, another version of you, another possibility where you continue. You begin to see how these infinite branches of existence could unfold, how each timeline contains an infinite number of possibilities, a world where you never die, but continue to move forward, one version of yourself after another. It's a dizzying thought, but somehow there's a quiet comfort in it. In this world, death is not an end. It is simply another possibility, another branch of the tree of life. But then, as the quiet hum of the universe surrounds you, a question lingers in your mind. If you never truly die, what would life mean? If every version of you continues on, does that make each one of your lives less meaningful? After all, if you're never truly gone, does the idea of living in a world of infinite versions of yourself diminish the importance of each individual life? And what if, after countless timelines, you grow weary of always surviving, always moving from one reality to the next? What if you long for the peace of an ending, for the finality of death, the release from the constant shift of existence? You take a deep breath as you allow these thoughts to settle in your mind. The quantum immortality paradox is not just about endless survival, it's about the very nature of existence. It asks you to consider the cost of immortality, to think about the balance between life and death, and what it means to truly live. The paradox opens up questions that are not easily answered. What happens when every version of you continues on? What happens when you are always alive, no matter how improbable the circumstances? As you stand there, reflecting on these questions, you begin to understand that the true nature of quantum immortality is not just about avoiding death. It's about the infinite possibilities of existence, the way that reality constantly shifts and splits into new versions of itself. It's a reminder that time is not linear, that it is fluid and ever changing, like a river that splits into countless branches. And in that understanding, there is both comfort and unease. The paradox of quantum immortality is not about avoiding the end. It's about realizing that the end may never come, that life in some form will continue on forever. And so you let go of the questions for now. You do not need to understand the full implications of quantum immortality. You simply let it be, letting the paradox settle into the corners of your thoughts. As you stand in the quiet, the world around you feels vast, infinite, and still. The landscape remains the same, yet it is forever changing. Time, in its endless flow, continues to stretch out before you, and you are a part of it. You may not understand it all, but for now, you can rest in the peace that comes from simply existing, simply being a part of this infinite, mysterious universe. And with that, you feel yourself sinking deeper into relaxation. The paradox, though complex, no longer feels like a burden. It is simply a part of the fabric of existence, like the quiet hum of the universe itself. You take a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill your lungs, and with each exhale, you feel yourself drifting deeper into peace. The questions fade into the background, leaving only the calm, the stillness, and the infinite possibilities of existence. As you continue to breathe slowly, your body relaxing more and more, you feel yourself being carried away by the quiet hum of the universe. The paradox of quantum immortality, with all its complexities and contradictions, fades gently into the background of your thoughts. You no longer need to solve it. You no longer need to understand it. You simply allow it to exist as it is, and with that, you sink deeper into the gentle embrace of sleep. 8. The Omnipotence Paradox. Imagine yourself standing in a vast, empty space, a quiet void where time doesn't seem to exist. The air is still, yet comforting, like the softest of whispers. The surroundings are devoid of boundaries, and the sensation of space stretches infinitely in all directions. You are alone in this place, but the stillness is not unsettling. There's a deep peace here, as if time itself is suspended in this serene, timeless expanse. The world around you feels as though it could go on forever, and yet it feels strangely intimate, as if this space was made just for you. Every breath you take fills you with tranquility, the very act of breathing deepening the calm around you. Each inhale is like a gentle wave coming to shore, and each exhale carries with it a release of tension. Your mind, once buzzing with thoughts, becomes calm and still, moving in rhythm with the peaceful environment. And then, in this quiet and stillness, a thought enters your mind. A question, subtle at first, but growing stronger as you focus on it. You begin to wonder, what does it truly mean to be all powerful? The question is simple, yet profound. It stirs something within you, a curiosity that pulls your thoughts deeper into itself. To be all powerful, omnipotent, is to possess no limits, no boundaries, no restrictions. It's the ultimate power, the kind that can shape reality itself, bend the very laws of nature to one's will. It's a concept that transcends everything you know about strength, control, and influence. It exists beyond time, beyond space, beyond reason. It is absolute, and yet it is something almost impossible to comprehend. You feel the weight of this question, and as you continue to ponder it, a new thought begins to surface. A paradox arises, one that challenges the very essence of omnipotence itself. Can an omnipotent being create a rock so heavy that even they cannot lift it? At first, the question feels like a riddle, something playful, almost whimsical, a paradox that challenges logic for the sake of amusement. But as you focus on it, the contradiction becomes clearer and you realize how profound it is. If an omnipotent being can do anything, then they should be able to create a rock of any size, shape, or weight. A rock so heavy that no force in the universe can lift it. But if they can create such a rock, then they cannot lift it. This would mean that there is something they cannot do, which seems to contradict the very idea of omnipotence. So the question becomes, how can an omnipotent being be all powerful if there is something they cannot do? If omnipotence is true power, then how can it exist alongside such limitations? Is omnipotence truly limitless if there are things that it cannot overcome, even by its own will? You take a slow, deep breath, allowing the weight of the question to settle into your mind. There is no need to rush to an answer, no need to immediately resolve this contradiction. Instead, you allow the paradox to gently float in the background of your thoughts, like a soft current of water. It's a reminder that even the most powerful concepts are filled with contradictions, questions that challenge our deepest understanding. But as you sit with the paradox, something begins to shift in your perception. Perhaps the true nature of omnipotence is not about the power to do the logically impossible. What if omnipotence does not mean having the ability to create contradictions, but rather the ability to shape reality within the bounds of possibility? Perhaps omnipotence is not about breaking the laws of nature, but understanding them so fully that one can work within them, shaping them to one's will. You begin to see omnipotence not as a power that defies logic, but as a force that exists in harmony with the natural order. It is the powers to do anything that can be done, but not the ability to perform the impossible, for the impossible is an idea that does not exist within the realm of possibility. The paradox now begins to lose its sharp edges. It no longer feels like an insurmountable contradiction, but rather a tool that invites deeper contemplation. The more you think about it, the more you realize that omnipotence might not be about breaking the rules, but about knowing and understanding them fully. True omnipotence would be the understanding of all things, the ability to navigate the laws of nature, time, and space with complete awareness and control, not by defying them, but by mastering them. As you sit with this new understanding, the vastness of the space around you feels more comfortable. The air seems to breathe with you, as though it, too, is part of this realization. You understand that power does not lie in the ability to break the rules of existence. Power lies in the ability to shape those rules, to understand them fully, and to work within them, transforming reality in ways that were once thought impossible. You take another deep breath. The paradox no longer weighs heavily on your mind. It has transformed into something more, a deeper understanding of what it means to be truly powerful. The power of omnipotence is not about limitless freedom, but about the ability to navigate the boundaries of existence with perfect grace, to shape and mold reality according to one's will within the framework of what is possible. You feel a quiet peace wash over you as you let this understanding sink in. The paradox, while complex, is not something that needs to be solved. It is simply part of the greater tapestry of existence. Not all paradoxes need to be resolved. Some exist to teach us about the limitations of our understanding, and in that there is wisdom. You close your eyes for a moment, feeling the quiet serenity of the space around you. The paradox no longer feels like an obstacle, but a gentle invitation to explore deeper truths about existence and power. You feel yourself becoming more relaxed, more at ease. The questions, the mysteries, are all part of the process of understanding the universe. And in that process, there is no need for immediate answers. The journey itself is enough. As you breathe in deeply again, you let the paradox fade into the background of your thoughts. It is no longer an urgent question to solve. It is simply a part of the flow of thought, a part of the peaceful, infinite expanse you find yourself in. The universe, in all its complexity, exists beyond the need for complete understanding. And with that realization, you feel the gentle hum of peace begin to settle over you. You are not bound by the need for answers. You are free to simply exist, to be a part of the great mystery of the world. The paradox fades from your mind, leaving behind only the quiet presence of the universe. Time, in this peaceful place, stretches out infinitely, and with it, you feel yourself sinking deeper into relaxation. There is no rush. There is no need to solve every riddle, to answer every question. The world is vast and full of mysteries, and that, in itself, is a beautiful thing. You allow the stillness to deepen as the questions, the mysteries, and the paradoxes fade into the distance. The world continues to turn, and in its turning, you are a part of it. There is peace in that realization. You no longer need to chase after answers. You can simply rest in the quiet, knowing that some things are meant to remain unanswered, and that is okay. With each breath, you feel your body becoming more relaxed, your mind quieter. The paradox, like all things, becomes a part of the rhythm of existence. It is no longer something to solve, but something to experience. And as you allow yourself to drift deeper into peace, you let go of any lingering tension, letting the quiet hum of the universe carry you toward a restful, peaceful sleep. 9. Zeno's Paradox, Achilles and the Tortoise. Imagine once again that you are standing in that serene, infinite space where the boundaries of time and reality seem to stretch out endlessly before you. The air is soft and cool, like a gentle breeze caressing the skin. You are calm here, suspended in the quiet stillness of existence, untouched by the passing moments. The world around you is so peaceful, so still, that it feels as if you have become one with the very fabric of time itself. As you stand there, you allow your mind to wander, drifting away from the weight of the world, letting go of all that's familiar. In this tranquil space, as your thoughts begin to expand, to stretch out into the infinite, you start to consider something that has puzzled thinkers for millennia: Zeno's paradox, and specifically the paradox known as Achilles and the tortoise. The paradox begins simply enough. Achilles, the swiftest runner in all of ancient Greece, is in a race against a tortoise. The tortoise, slow and steady, is given a small head start. Now, Achilles, who is far faster than the tortoise, must surely catch up with it. But Zeno's paradox suggests something far stranger. Zeno argues that Achilles will never actually overtake the tortoise, no matter how fast he runs. How can this be? After all, Achilles is much faster. He should easily pass the tortoise. But Zeno's reasoning goes deeper, and the more you reflect on it, the more complex it becomes. Zeno's argument suggests that before Achilles can catch the tortoise, he must first reach the point where the tortoise started. But by the time he reaches that point, the tortoise has already moved ahead by a small distance. Achilles then must reach the next point where the tortoise is, but the tortoise has moved a little farther once again. And so it continues. As long as Achilles is trying to catch the tortoise, there will always be an infinite number of steps he must take, each smaller and smaller, but never quite reaching the end. You pause for a moment, reflecting on this, and feel the paradox unfold in your mind. Zeno's paradox doesn't just challenge our understanding of motion, it challenges the very nature of time itself. Each time Achilles approaches the tortoise moves slightly farther. No matter how fast Achilles runs, he can never completely overtake the tortoise. The paradox seems to defy logic, and in its defiance, it calls into question something fundamental about our experience of the world. As you stand in this quiet, infinite space, the paradox becomes more than just a mathematical riddle. It becomes a reflection of how we experience time, movement, and the very nature of change. If Achilles can never overtake the tortoise, then how do we understand the passage of time? How do we move through life when there always seems to be an infinite number of steps ahead of us, each one getting closer, but never quite reaching the destination. You take a slow, deep breath, allowing the idea to settle. The paradox feels strange, unsettling, and yet there's a peacefulness in allowing it to simply be. Time, like motion, feels infinitely divisible, with each moment slipping into the next, always moving forward, but never quite reaching the end. How can we experience time as a continuous flow if it's made up of an infinite series of moments that never fully meet? But here's where the true beauty of the paradox reveals itself. Zeno's paradox was not meant to show that motion is impossible, but rather to demonstrate that our understanding of motion and time is incomplete. The idea of infinite divisions of time, of movement, that never quite reaches its goal, speaks to the paradox of our own perception. Zeno's paradox forces us to recognize that time, in its essence, does not function in the linear, continuous way we typically experience it. It is, in a way, composed of an infinite number of moments, yet we experience it as a whole. As you sit with this thought, you begin to understand something profound about life itself. The process of moving through time, through space, is not simply about reaching an endpoint. It's about experiencing the moments in between, the infinite steps that lead us to where we are. We think of life as a series of clear, distinct actions, steps that bring us closer to our goals, but in truth, each moment is an endless unfolding of possibilities, each one leading into the next. The paradox of Achilles and the tortoise isn't a problem to be solved. It's a reminder of the infinite nature of time and existence. Just as Zeno showed us the infinite divisions within motion, we come to understand that the journey itself is not about arriving at a single destination, but about experiencing each step along the way. Each moment is part of an endless process, a beautiful unfolding of time and space, in which we can never truly say we've reached the end, because the end is not the point. You breathe deeply, letting the gentle rhythm of your breath remind you of the constant unfolding of moments. Life is not about the finish line, the goal to be achieved. It is about each step we take, each action, no matter how small, that brings us into the present. In the context of Zeno's paradox, Achilles may never overtake the tortoise in the strict sense, but his journey, the process of running, of moving through time, is where the true experience lies. You let this realization sink in, feeling the soft weight of the paradox gently dissolve as you accept its deeper meaning. There is no need to resolve the paradox, no need to understand motion in the way we think we should. Instead, you embrace the journey itself, the quiet steps you take in each moment. It is the movement through time that matters, not the arrival. Zeno's paradox is a reminder that in every step, in every moment, we are part of something larger, something infinitely expansive. As you let the paradox rest in your mind, you feel a deep sense of peace. The universe is vast, and we, like Achilles, are always in motion. There are infinite steps ahead, each leading us deeper into the flow of time. We may never truly reach the end, but it is not the destination that matters. It is the process, the journey, and the beautiful unfolding of moments that define our experience. And with that understanding, you feel the quiet stillness of the space around you, the soft hum of the universe as time continues its endless dance. You breathe deeply, each exhale carrying you further into relaxation. There is no rush, no need to worry about the future or the past. In this moment, you are simply here, experiencing the beauty of love unfolding, just as Achilles experiences his run, not in the goal, but in the movement itself. The Sorate's paradox, the paradox of the heap. Imagine for a moment that you are standing in the middle of a quiet, open space. The floor beneath you is smooth, covered with soft, golden sand that stretches out into the distance. The air around you is warm, carrying the scent of earth and freshness, while the soft whisper of a breeze grazes the surface of the sand. As you stand here, the world feels peaceful, undisturbed. Time seems to slow down in this place, and you feel completely immersed in the present moment. Now, imagine before you there lies a pile of sand. It's not too large, but it's certainly noticeable, a small mound, perhaps, rising gently from the ground. You gaze at it, thinking nothing more of it, until you start to wonder about its nature. What makes this pile of sand a heap? What is it that turns this small mound into a heap, and how does it happen? This is the essence of the Sorites paradox, or the paradox of the heap, a thought experiment that explores how we define things when they change gradually, piece by piece over time. The paradox begins with a simple idea. If you have a heap of sand and you remove one grain of sand, you still have a heap, right? After all, the pile is still large enough to be considered a heap, even though one grain is missing. You remove another grain, and it's still a heap, and another, but at what point does it stop being a heap? You stand there, pondering this question. As you keep removing grains of sand, the pile shrinks. It becomes smaller, less noticeable, but does it stop being a heap at some point? Can you pinpoint the moment when it no longer qualifies as a heap? How many grains of sand can you remove before the mound ceases to be considered a heap? The very act of removing one grain at a time seems to make the process gradual, so subtle that it's hard to say exactly when the transformation happens. This is where the Sorites paradox really begins to challenge the way we think about categories, definitions, and boundaries. It forces us to confront a deeper question. When do we say something ceases to belong to a particular category? Is there a clear point at which a heap of sand stops being a heap? And if there isn't, then how can we define anything with certainty? As you stand in this peaceful, quiet space, you begin to feel a growing sense of uncertainty. The sand before you is not just a heap anymore, it's a riddle, a paradox that disrupts your usual way of thinking. What makes something a heap in the first place? The answer isn't so clear cut. It's not just the amount of sand, nor the shape of the pile, nor its height. No, it's something more elusive, something that can shift based on how you think about it. The heap doesn't become something else suddenly. Instead, it seems to dissolve gradually, imperceptibly. You begin to understand that the Sorites paradox isn't just about sand or heaps. It's about how we categorize everything. Think about how we define things in life: wealth, adulthood, intelligence, even personal identity. These are all concepts that exist on a spectrum, but we try to define them with neat, rigid lines. How much money makes you wealthy? When does a person become an adult? When does a person truly understand something? These lines are often blurry, shifting, impossible to pinpoint with precision. In this moment, standing in front of the pile of sand, you realize that this paradox points to something fundamental about the way we perceive the world. The heap of sand doesn't just represent a pile of grains, it represents gradual change. Change that happens so slowly, so imperceptibly, that it challenges our need for certainty and clear cut categories. It's a reminder that life is fluid, ever changing, and sometimes there is no clear moment when one thing stops and another begins. It's not just about the grains of sand, it's about how we understand transformation itself. You let the idea settle, allowing the paradox to unfurl gently in your mind. As you contemplate the gradual disappearance of the heap, you feel a deeper truth about the fluidity of existence. We are constantly changing, and yet we try so hard to define who we are, what we are, where we fit in the world. But like the heap of sand, we are always evolving, always shifting, and sometimes the boundaries we set for ourselves are arbitrary, just like the definition of a heap. The paradox deepens further when you consider what happens when you start adding grains of sand instead of removing them. What makes the sand pile a heap in the first place? Is there an absolute threshold, a magical number of grains, after which the pile definitively becomes a heap? Or is it simply the accumulation of change, of adding little by little until the difference is no longer noticeable? And what about things that grow or shrink over time? Our sense of self, for instance, shifts continuously. We change with each experience, each new relationship, each new thought. When do we stop being the person we were before? When does someone truly become a different version of themselves? And when does the heap of sand stop being a heap, becoming something else entirely, perhaps just a collection of grains? When do we cease to be the person we once were and start becoming the person we are becoming? You take a slow, deep breath, allowing the complexity of this paradox to wash over you. The paradox isn't just about sand, and it's not just about categorization. It's about the nature of change and the difficulty we have in accepting that change is often gradual, that it can't always be pinpointed, and that sometimes it's okay not to have definitive answers. It's okay to exist in the ambiguity, to live in the gray areas between categories. We don't always need to draw a line to say, this is a heap and this is not. The world, much like the heap of sand, is full of gradients, nuances, and subtleties. We are never the same person we were yesterday, just as the heap is never the same heap. The question is not about when the heap stops being a heap, but about understanding the process, the flow of time, the endless cycle of transformation. Sometimes, the very act of change is what defines us, not the end result. As you breathe in the cool, calming air, the paradox begins to fade into the background of your thoughts. It's not something to be solved or figured out. It's simply a part of the dance of life, a reminder of the fluid nature of everything. In the quiet, gentle stillness of the world around you, the paradox becomes part of the rhythm of existence. There are no clear cut answers, and that's okay. The journey is not about certainty, but about the unfolding, the change, the gradual movement towards something new. The sand, the heap, and the paradox are all part of the same thing, life's journey. And with that realization, you find a deep sense of peace, knowing that it's okay not to have all the answers. Change is inevitable, and in that inevitability, there is beauty. As you breathe deeply, feeling your body relax into the soft, rhythmic waves of the universe, you allow the paradox to fade into the distance. The heap is no longer important. What matters is the flow, the transformation, the ever shifting sands of time. Russell's paradox. Imagine yourself standing in a vast, endless space, a place that seems to stretch in all directions. The air around you is still, heavy with the weight of infinity. You feel as though time itself has slowed to a near standstill. The world outside, the hustle of life, feels distant, almost irrelevant. There is only the soft hum of quiet, as though the very fabric of existence is holding its breath. The stillness of the moment, combined with the soft ambient glow that bathes everything around you, creates a perfect environment for deep contemplation. As you stand there, fully immersed in this serene space, your thoughts begin to drift. In the quiet of this place, you're free from the distractions of the world. Your mind, once cluttered with the worries of everyday life, begins to settle. Slowly, you begin to focus on something deeper, something that has intrigued and perplexed thinkers for centuries: the nature of logic, language, and the very foundations of how we understand the world. This brings you to Russell's paradox, a riddle that has caused philosophers and mathematicians to pause and reconsider the entire structure of logic and mathematics itself. You feel the presence of something both unsettling and fascinating, a thought that stretches your mind in ways you had not anticipated. The paradox begins simply, yet it carries with it deep, challenging questions. Can a set contain itself? To most, this question seems innocent enough. A set, in its simplest form, is merely a collection of objects. In everyday life, we use sets to categorize and group things that share common properties. For example, consider the set of all red objects. Anything that is red belongs to this set. We intuitively understand this concept, and it works perfectly well for the most part. But what happens when we apply this concept to something more abstract, like the set of all sets? In mathematics, the concept of a set is one of the foundational building blocks of logic. Sets are used to organize things into collections, to make sense of different elements based on shared properties. But the question Russell poses is far deeper and more elusive. Can a set be a member of itself? At first glance, this might seem like a harmless philosophical question, but as you begin to delve deeper into it, the paradox becomes more apparent. Consider this. Suppose you have a set, and that set contains only those sets which do not contain themselves. Let's call this set R, the set of all sets that are not members of themselves. Now, the paradox begins. Does R contain itself? If R contains itself, then by definition, it cannot be a member of itself because it only contains sets that do not contain themselves. But if R does not contain itself, then, by the same reasoning, it must contain itself, since it is a set that does not contain itself. This creates a loop, a contradiction that doesn't seem to resolve itself. This is Russell's paradox in its most basic form. It's a paradox because R cannot simultaneously contain and not contain itself, no matter how you reason through it. It creates a logical contradiction that challenges our understanding of sets and how they can be defined. But what's more unsettling is that this paradox undermines the foundation of set theory, the very system of logic that much of mathematics is built upon. As you stand in the quiet space contemplating this paradox, you begin to realize that Russell's paradox is not just a challenge to mathematics, but to our entire understanding of logic and categorization. We often assume that definitions can be clear and precise, that the boundaries between one thing and another can be neatly defined. But Russell's paradox shows us that there are limits to our ability to define things, and these limits can lead to contradictions. The paradox does more than just challenge the structure of sets. It forces us to think deeply about the nature of definitions and categories. When we try to define something, whether it's a set, a person, or an idea, we often impose boundaries that seem firm and unyielding. But what happens when those boundaries begin to blur, when the categories we rely on break down? Russell's paradox is a direct confrontation with the limitations of categorization. It reveals that some things cannot be defined by our standard methods, and that even the most seemingly simple concepts, like sets, can lead us into contradictions. You begin to feel a sense of unease, not because the paradox is an impossible riddle, but because it forces you to confront a deeper question about the very nature of knowledge. What happens when our systems of understanding break down? When our most fundamental concepts, like sets, begin to contradict themselves, what does that say about the limits of human reasoning? You stand still in the vast, endless space, feeling the weight of the paradox settle into your thoughts. It is no longer just an intellectual challenge, it is a reminder of the fragility of knowledge. We often think of logic as something absolute, something that can be trusted without question. But Russell's paradox shows us that even the most logical systems can contain contradictions, can break down in ways that we can't easily explain. As you breathe deeply, you let the paradox unfold further in your mind. You begin to see how it reflects something deeper, the complexity of understanding itself. Knowledge, like the sets we define, is often not as simple as it appears. It is fluid, evolving, and sometimes elusive. The more we try to define things with precision, the more we run the risk of falling into contradictions, of encountering the limits of our definitions. This paradox teaches us that certainty is not always as certain as we believe. In the quiet stillness of your surroundings, you allow yourself to sit with this paradox. There is no need to resolve it, to find a neat answer. The paradox itself is a tool, a thought experiment that forces you to rethink the nature of logic, categorization, and even language itself. It shows us that our systems of reasoning, no matter how elegant, are imperfect and incomplete. You take a step back, letting the quiet hum of the universe fill the space around you. The paradox remains, but you no longer feel the need to solve it. It is simply a part of the journey of understanding. Just as we can never fully define the boundaries of sets, so too are there limits to our understanding. We can only work within those limits, using the tools we have, while always acknowledging that there are mysteries we may never fully grasp. As you continue to breathe deeply, you begin to feel a deep sense of peace. Russell's paradox, while unsettling, is also a reminder of the beauty in the mystery of the universe. Not all answers can be found, not all questions can be resolved, and in is that uncertainty, there is a certain peace, the understanding that some things, like knowledge itself, are ever evolving, always open to interpretation. The library around you, infinite in its collection, seems to hold an infinite number of truths and contradictions. The paradoxes are simply part of the landscape of knowledge. You don't need to resolve them. You can simply experience them, live with them, and in that, find peace. With each exhale, you feel the weight of the paradox lift. There is no need to chase certainty. The questions, the mysteries, and the contradictions are part of the ongoing journey of understanding, and that journey is enough. You allow the paradox to fade gently into the background of your mind, knowing that it will always be there, a part of the infinite dance of thought and discovery. 13. The paradox of the unexpected lottery. Imagine yourself standing in the center of a quiet, dimly lit room. The air is still, and everything around you seems to exist in a state of calm perfection. There is no rush, no hurry, only the steady pulse of time moving around you, as though the world has slowed down just for this moment. You take a slow breath, filling your lungs with the cool, crisp air. It is a moment of peace, a moment of solitude, where you are free from the distractions and pressures of the world. In the midst of this calm, your mind begins to wander. It begins to drift, slowly, into a new thought, one that seems as improbable as it is fascinating: the lottery. It's a simple concept, and yet, when you think about it, it holds a strange paradox at its heart. The lottery is a game of chance, a game where millions of people take part, each hoping for the improbable, the winning ticket. The odds are incredibly low, but the allure of the prize is undeniable. People dream of winning, imagining the fortune they could gain. And yet, despite the overwhelming odds against winning, someone always does. Someone always wins. But this is where the paradox begins to unfold. In a typical lottery, the odds are so slim that it seems impossible for anyone to win. The chances of your ticket being drawn are so small, you might feel as though it is irrational to even consider the possibility of winning. After all, with millions of tickets sold, how could your single ticket possibly be the one that is chosen? And yet, when the lottery numbers are drawn, a winner always emerges. Someone has won, and that person, perhaps you, is the one who now holds the winning ticket. But here lies the paradox. If the odds are so incredibly small, why do we still expect someone to win? The very low probability suggests that no one should win, but in reality, the lottery always has a winner. This creates a situation in which something that seems highly improbable becomes inevitable. The paradox stretches further when you consider the thought process of the people involved. Imagine you are one of the millions who purchased a ticket. You are told in advance that one person will win, but no one knows who that person is, nor when the winner will be announced. The closer you get to the moment of the draw, the more you convince yourself that, of course, it won't be you. Statistically, you know the odds. No one wins this kind of lottery. It's just too improbable. You reason that the winner must be someone else. And yet, when the time comes and the numbers are drawn, there you are, the winner. The paradox is revealed in the very act of expectation. You expected not to win because the odds told you it was unlikely, but in the end, someone had to win. And that someone was you. As you sit with this thought, the paradox begins to take on deeper layers. Why does our mind work in such a way? Why do we assume that the improbable, even the impossible, won't happen, despite evidence to the contrary? The unexpected lottery paradox forces us to confront our assumptions about probability and certainty. We convince ourselves that something is so unlikely that it cannot happen, only to find that inevitably it does. There's something deeply unsettling about this paradox, something that challenges our view of the world. What does it mean for something to be improbable and yet inevitable? How do we reconcile the seeming randomness of the universe with the certainty of outcomes that are, in the strictest sense, improbable? What happens when we try to predict the unpredictable? You take a slow, deep breath, feeling the paradox settle in your mind. There is a quiet beauty in this riddle as it shows us the limits of our reasoning. We like to think that the world follows a predictable pattern, that events unfold according to the probabilities we can calculate. But the unexpected lottery paradox reminds us that the universe doesn't always follow the rules we set out for it. There are things that happen despite all odds, things that occur because they must, and this is the unsettling part. Sometimes, events unfold in ways that defy logic and probability, and yet they happen. As you continue to reflect, you realize that this paradox is not just about lotteries or about random chance. It's about our expectations. It's about how we view the world, how we shape our decisions, and how we manage uncertainty. The paradox serves as a reminder that life is full of surprises, full of moments that, despite all our reasoning, will always remain unpredictable, and it is in these moments that we experience the true nature of surprise. It is not about what we expect, but about what we never saw coming. The deeper you sit with this thought, the more it resonates within you. Life itself is like a lottery. We make our choices, we follow the odds, we believe we know what is likely and unlikely. But in the end, we cannot predict the outcome. Even when the odds are stacked against us, there is always a chance, however slim, that the improbable will happen. You feel the weight of this realization in your chest. The paradox teaches you to accept uncertainty, to embrace the surprises that come your way. In the face of unpredictability, we learn to surrender to the unknown, to trust that what comes will come. You take another deep breath, and in that exhale, you let go of the need to control every outcome, to predict every future event. There is peace in knowing that some things, no matter how unlikely, are destined to happen. And in that peaceful acceptance, the paradox begins to dissolve. The unexpected lottery paradox no longer feels like a puzzle to solve, but a truth to accept. Life, with all its randomness and improbability, continues to unfold, and no matter how much we try to predict it, we can never fully know what will come next. But perhaps that is the beauty of it all, the chance to be surprised, to experience the unexpected, and to live in the mystery of what is to come. 14. The Twin Paradox. Imagine, for a moment, that you are standing in the middle of a serene meadow. The grass beneath you sways gently in the wind, its vibrant green hue a contrast to the soft blue of the sky above. The sun shines warmly, but the breeze cools your skin. In this moment, everything is calm, peaceful. Time seems to slow, its passage imperceptible as you stand in this tranquil space. Every thought feels softer, more distant, as if the very environment around you encourages your mind to drift into contemplation. As you stand there, taking in the beauty and stillness, you begin to feel a curiosity stirring inside you. There's something intriguing, something deeply mysterious about time. Time is something we all experience, something we all rely on, yet it is so often taken for granted. We think of time as a constant, a steady, unchanging force. But what if time, in reality, is not as fixed as we believe? What if time itself can bend, shift, and change, depending on where we are, how we move, and how we experience the world? This question brings you to think about the twin paradox, a thought experiment that challenges everything we know about time. This paradox, rooted in the theory of special relativity, revolves around two identical twins, Alice and Bob, and the nature of time as it relates to speed, motion, and the way we perceive reality. The paradox begins with the simple premise that Alice and Bob are twins, identical in every way. They were born at the same time, grew up together, shared experiences, and are essentially the same in every way, except for one fundamental difference. Alice is about to embark on a journey into space, while Bob will remain on Earth. This decision will change their lives in ways they cannot begin to comprehend. Alice, driven by a sense of adventure and curiosity, boards a spaceship, one capable of traveling at speeds close to the speed of light. The ship is sleek, its design elegant, but more importantly, it is a vehicle that will allow Alice to travel at a speed so fast that it will alter the very nature of time itself. As Alice begins her journey, moving faster and faster, closer and closer to the speed of light, something remarkable begins to happen. Time for Alice begins to slow down. This is a core principle of special relativity, a groundbreaking theory developed by Albert Einstein. Time is relative. It is not an absolute, unchanging force that ticks away the same for everyone. Instead, time is dependent on the relative motion between observers. The faster an object moves relative to another observer, the slower time passes for the object in motion. And Alice, traveling at a speed near the speed of light, will experience time at a dramatically slower rate than her twin, Bob, who remains on Earth. As Alice travels deeper into space, her clock ticks slower and slower, compared to Bob's clock on Earth. For her, the passage of time seems to be stretching, like a rubber band that is being pulled ever so gently. A few years pass for Alice, but for Bob, those same years have stretched into decades. The paradox deepens when you realize that from Bob's perspective, Alice's journey is playing out in slow motion. Every moment for her seems to unfold more slowly, as though she is frozen in time. She appears to move through space at a pace far slower than Bob, who remains stationary on Earth. Meanwhile, Bob is experiencing time normally. He lives his life day by day, just as you do. The passage of time for him feels steady, unbroken. But the strange truth of this paradox is that time for Bob is passing faster than it is for Alice. Even though they are both experiencing life, both experiencing the passage of time, their experiences are drastically different due to the speed at which Alice is traveling. Now, here's where the paradox becomes even more perplexing. What happens when Alice returns to Earth? After her journey through space, after traveling at nearly the speed of light, Alice returns to her home, the very planet she left so many years ago. She lands in the same place she took off from, expecting to find Bob waiting for her, just as she left him. She is excited to reunite with her twin, to share the experience of her travels. But when Alice and Bob meet again, something unexpected happens. Bob has aged far more than Alice. While Alice has only experienced a few years, Bob has aged decades. He has lived a full life while Alice has barely aged. The difference in their ages is not just at a few years, it is a profound gap, one that reflects the fundamental difference in their experiences of time. Bob, who stayed on Earth, has lived through the passage of time as we all know it, at a constant, unchanging pace. Alice, however, has traveled at near the speed of light, and because of this, time has passed more slowly for her. The faster you move, the slower time passes for you, and this is the key to understanding the twin paradox. You take a deep breath as you let the magnitude of this realization sink in. The paradox challenges everything you know about time. How can two identical twins, born at the same moment and living through the same experiences, end up with such different perceptions of time? How can time pass so differently for two people who are connected by the same history, yet separated by the relative motion of one twin traveling at nearly the speed of light? This paradox is a profound reminder of how relative time truly is. It reveals that time is not an unchanging force, but a flexible one, deeply influenced by the speed at which you are moving. The twin paradox shows us that time is not absolute. It is not a universal truth that applies the same way for everyone. Instead, time stretches and compresses depending on how fast you are traveling through space. As you stand in the meadow, breathing deeply, you begin to understand the deeper implications of this paradox. Time is fluid. It flows differently for different people depending on their motion through the universe. It is a reminder that reality, as we understand it, is not as fixed and predictable as we might like to believe. The universe operates on principles that go far beyond our everyday experiences, and time, the very thing we measure and track every day, is not a constant at all. It is malleable, shaped by the very speed at which we move through the cosmos. But there is more to this paradox than just a lesson about time. The twin paradox invites us to consider the nature of identity itself. If Alice and Bob are identical in every way, if they share the same history, the same experiences, and yet experience time in such different ways, then what does it mean to be the same person? Is identity merely a product of our physical bodies, or is it something deeper, something that transcends time and space? The paradox raises questions about what makes us who we are. Is it our experiences, our memories, the passage of time, or is it something else, something more intrinsic, something that cannot be measured by the ticking of a clock? As you reflect on these questions, the meadow around you feels even more tranquil, as if the very air is inviting you to settle into these thoughts without rushing. The paradox, while baffling, is not just a riddle to solve. It is a doorway into a deeper understanding of how we exist in the world, how we experience reality, and how our perception of time is intimately tied to our motion through the universe. In a way, the twin paradox teaches us to let go of rigid concepts of time and identity and to embrace the fluidity of experience, of existence itself. You take another deep breath, and with it, you let go of any attempt to solve the paradox completely. Perhaps the point is not to resolve the contradictions, but to accept them, to live with the mystery of time's relativity. Perhaps, in the end, the paradox shows us that life is not about the answers we find, but about the questions we ask. The twin paradox asks us to embrace the complexity of reality, to acknowledge that time, space, and identity are not as simple as we often believe. As you continue to stand in the meadow, surrounded by the stillness of the moment, you feel the paradox soften, fading into the quiet corners of your mind. There is no need to rush toward an answer. There is peace in the acceptance of the unknown, of the mysteries that exist beyond our understanding. You are simply a part of this vast, ever moving universe, experiencing time in your own unique way. The paradox continues to unfold in your mind, and as it does, you find a sense of calm. Time is not an enemy, it is a companion, a journey that we are all on, moving through space and experience. Whether we are moving through it quickly or slowly, whether time is speeding up or slowing down, it is all part of the same infinite flow. And in that flow, there is beauty, there is peace, and there is acceptance. 15. The Sorites Paradox, the paradox of the heap. Imagine for a moment that you are standing in a quiet, open space. The ground beneath you is soft, perhaps covered with a thin layer of sand, and the world around you feels vast, endless, yet comforting. The sky above is clear and expansive, stretching out in all directions. There is a gentle breeze, barely perceptible, carrying the scent of the earth. It's a perfect place for deep reflection, a space where time seems to slow down, allowing your mind to wander freely, unburdened by the usual constraints of the world. As you stand there, taking in the beauty of your surroundings, a thought begins to form in your mind, one that feels almost like an invitation. You find yourself wondering about the nature of categories, how we define things, how we draw lines between one thing and another. How do we determine where one thing begins and another ends. The question lingers in the air, gently pressing upon your mind, and before you can fully form an answer, a new question emerges. At what point does something become something else? More specifically, when does a pile of sand become a heap? You let this thought unfold, watching it take shape in your mind. Imagine, for a moment, a simple pile of sand sitting quietly on the ground. The grains are scattered, not neatly arranged, but simply gathered in one place. It's not a very large pile, but it's noticeable enough. You take a step closer and consider this pile of sand. Is it a heap? At first, it seems like a reasonable question. The pile is not large enough to be considered a massive heap, but it's not just a single grain of sand either. It's somewhere in between. But then you begin to wonder, when does this pile become a heap? You take a grain of sand and carefully remove it. The pile shrinks just slightly, but it still feels like a pile. You remove another grain, and the pile becomes just a little smaller. But is it still a heap? How many grains of sand do you need to remove before this pile stops being a heap? This is the essence of the Sorites paradox, a thought experiment that questions the very nature of vagueness in our definitions and concepts. The paradox asks us to consider how we define categories that exist on a spectrum, categories that don't have clear cut boundaries. When does a pile of sand transform into a heap? At what point does something that is not quite a heap become a heap? And conversely, when does a heap stop being a heap as you slowly remove individual grains? As you stand there contemplating this, you realize that the question is more complex than it first seemed. There is no precise moment when a pile of sand suddenly becomes a heap. It's a gradual process, one where the boundary between what is and what is not a heap becomes increasingly unclear. It's not as if you can point to a single grain of sand and say, this is the moment when the pile becomes a heap. It's more fluid, more subtle, like the fading of day into night. It happens slowly, almost imperceptibly. You take another deep breath, allowing the paradox to settle within you. What does this say about the nature of definitions and categories? We often define things based on clear cut boundaries, thinking of concepts as discrete and separate. But the Sorites paradox shows us that many categories are inherently vague, their boundaries blurred by the gradual changes that occur over time. A pile of sand is not suddenly a heap at a specific moment. It becomes a heap slowly, imperceptibly. And the same is true for many concepts we deal with every day. As you continue to reflect, the implications of this paradox start to take on a deeper meaning. The Sorites paradox is not just about sand, it is a reflection of life itself. Many of the concepts we rely on to understand the world, age, wealth, intelligence, beauty, are also vague and subjective. How do we define someone as old? At what point does a child become an adult? How many moments of maturity must pass before a person is considered mature? These are questions we wrestle with all the time, and yet they do not have clear, definitive answers. Just like the sand pile, there is no precise moment when someone becomes old, when someone becomes an adult, or when a heap of sand turns into a heap. 15. The Sorites paradox, the paradox of the heap. Imagine for a moment that you are standing in a quiet, open space. The ground beneath you is soft, perhaps covered with a thin layer of sand, and the world around you feels vast, endless, yet comforting. The sky above is clear and expansive, stretching out in all directions. There is a gentle breeze, barely perceptible, carrying the scent of the earth. It's a perfect place for deep reflection, a space where time seems to slow down, allowing your mind to wander freely, unburdened by the usual constraints of the world. As you stand there, taking in the beauty of your surroundings, a thought begins to form in your mind, one that feels almost like an invitation. You find yourself wondering about the nature of categories, how we define things, how we draw lines between one thing and another. How do we determine where one thing begins and another ends? The question lingers in the air, gently pressing upon your mind, and before you can fully form an answer, a new question emerges. At what point does something become something else? More specifically, when does a pile of sand become a heap? You let this thought unfold, watching it take shape in your mind. Imagine, for a moment, a simple pile of sand sitting quietly on the ground. The grains are scattered, not neatly arranged, but simply gathered in one place. It's not a very large pile, but it's noticeable enough. You take a step closer and consider this pile of sand. Is it a heap? At first, it seems like a reasonable question. The pile is not large enough to be considered a massive heap, but it's not just a single grain of sand either. It's somewhere in between. But then you begin to wonder, when does this pile become a heap? You take a grain of sand and carefully remove it. The pile shrinks just slightly, but it still feels like a pile. You remove another grain, and the pile becomes just a little smaller. But is it still a heap? How many grains of sand do you need to remove before this pile stops being a heap? This is the essence of the Sorites paradox, a thought experiment that questions the very nature of vagueness in our definitions and concepts. The paradox asks us to consider how we define categories that exist on a spectrum, categories that don't have clear cut boundaries. When does a pile of sand transform into a heap? At what point does something that is not quite a heap become a heap? And conversely, when does a heap stop being a heap as you slowly remove individual grains? As you stand there contemplating this, you realize that the question is more complex than it first seemed. There is no precise moment when a pile of sand suddenly becomes a heap. It's a gradual process, one where the boundary between what is and what is not a heap becomes increasingly unclear. It's not as if you can point to a single grain of sand and say, this is the moment when the pile becomes a heap. It's more fluid, more subtle, like the fading of day into night. It happens slowly, almost imperceptibly. You take another deep breath, allowing the paradox to settle within you. What does this say about the nature of definitions and categories? We often define things based on clear cut boundaries, thinking of concepts as discrete and separate. But the Sorites paradox shows us that many categories are inherently vague, their boundaries blurred by the gradual changes that occur over time. A pile of sand is not suddenly a heap at a specific moment. It becomes a heap slowly, imperceptibly. And the same is true for many concepts we deal with every day. As you continue to reflect, the implications of this paradox start to take on a deeper meaning. The sorites. Paradox is not just about sand, it is a reflection of life itself. Many of the concepts we rely on to understand the world, age, wealth, intelligence, beauty, are also vague and subjective. How do we define someone as old? At what point does a child become an adult? How many moments of maturity must pass before a person is considered mature? These are questions we wrestle with all the time, and yet they do not have clear, definitive answers. Just like the sand pile, there is no precise moment when someone becomes old, when someone becomes an adult, or when a heap of sand turns into a heap.